And hello, minions. Welcome back to the second episode of Designer Discussion. Today, I have two of our designers. We've got Goober, who's come back for the second time, and for the first time, we've got Stan with the exclamation mark. Please make sure to pronounce that exclamation mark when you say it. How you doing today, Chubbs?
I'm doing good.
Glad to hear it. All right, so we're here with a couple of questions that the community has had about our system for a while. Some of these are going to be a retread for you, Goober, but we want to make sure that we get everybody's perspective on this. So I think we're just going to jump right into the nitty-gritty and hit the most popular question that we get, which has been asked nicely and not so nicely through the socials, which is, why 5th edition? So I think we're going to start with you, Stan. I want to get your perspective on why are we bringing back D20 Modern in 5th edition?
So, I mean, there's two ways to look at it, right? If you want to look at it from the perspective of we're bringing back D20 Modern, then the question is, why are you wandering from that system? If you want to look at it from the perspective of we are creating a modern iteration of that kind of game, then you want to start with the state of the art of the game design. And what D20 Modern used 3rd edition because that's what everyone was playing. That's why that's what we built it on back then. We start from now. We don't have to do that. A lot has been learned in the last 20 years. A lot of improvements have been made over the last couple of editions. And the bulk of the audience, if you want to look at that same audience we were looking at in 2000, 2002, that same audience now, the bulk of them are in the 5e realm. So it just makes sense to go that way.
Awesome. Any other insights on there, Goober?
I talked about it a bit before, but basically the idea is, besides just that, it's popular and people are playing it a lot, it's, it's more recent, so that, like, they learned a lot in designing it, play testing it a whole bunch. I also really think that it is just a very good balance of a lot of things. It's very, I would say, kind of middle of the road in terms of complexity versus simplicity. I think it gets a lot of both. Without too much sacrifice of the other. It's very easy to just sort of sit down and start playing. You can also really dig into it and learn all the exact things and memorize all the things, and if that's the kind of system you like, you can do that, or you can just pick some stuff, make your character, and play.
Absolutely. So,
if we were to go back and build something that was based off the original, there'd be so much that we'd have to teach the modern audience to. It's kind of like that, but it's different. We did it different back then. Right? It's got the same name, but it doesn't quite work the same way. And there's a lot of as the old guy who's been playing through that, I still find myself tripping over. I'm doing things like we did it in 4th edition and 3rd edition and 2nd edition because the name's the same, right? So you want something for the modern audience to have the easiest time playing your game.
Absolutely. So I have to ask you, for having all those perspectives from those different systems, can you tell me, what is it about 5th edition that appeals to you particularly?
I think Goober hit on a bunch of it. I mean, and it falls back to something I said a little earlier. That we've learned a lot over the last 20 years, and we made improvements. I think 5e currently is my favorite version of D&D, and it pulls in bits of what I like from a lot of the previous editions, and it uses them smartly to make a good modern version of the game. It plays the way D&D should in the year 2022.
Yeah.
There's also kind of the question of why build it off of D&D and not some other system, of course. But I mean, I think basically the same kinds of things really apply there. Where like I think it just has D&D has just a really good balance of of attributes, whereas some people have suggested like why isn't it GURPS? And like that's because it's incredibly complicated. It's a very hard system to get into. There's a lot to learn about it. It's really hard to balance a game with that, like as a GM, because it's so like open and you just sort of buy abilities and stuff. And then something like why not maybe Fate, which is the complete other side of it, where it's very simple, it's very easy to start playing, but there isn't quite as much kind of depth and crunch there. So both of those I think are very good systems for what they do, but they're also very extreme systems. They're something that specific kinds of players will like a lot, and other people won't as much. Whereas I think 5e gets in the middle quite well, where people who like either kind of thing will find something to like.
Okay, and I have to know what was the most difficult aspect of the original D20 Modern to translate over into 5th edition?
Yeah, Goober, what was it?
I'm not sure about like translating the original system specifically in terms of difficulty. I think most of the time when it comes to like the things that were difficult to make, it's more about like this is a modern setting, there's modern technology and everything like that, and then looking at D20 Modern actually just sort of helped sort of guide that a little bit, because it dealt with the same problems. So something like the class system in D20 Modern, where it's kind of based on each of the ability scores, rather than your adventuring profession. You're not a fighter or a wizard or a rogue. You're just a certain kind of hero. You're a strong hero. You're a tough hero. And so we just sort of took that idea and ran with it, and built it with the 5th edition concept of sort of your class and subclass. But in this case, we sort of emphasized the subclass a lot more, where the base class is more of a larger archetype. The more specific stuff is akin to kind of the like talents and stuff you could take in D20 Modern. So things like that were like sort of a good guidance for like how do we even approach a modern setting. So I don't think anything was like difficult to convert. More like just a good guidance.
Okay, so that kind of brings me to my next question, which is having developed for a few different systems. Were there any pitfalls that you wanted to make sure that we avoided with Everyday Heroes? Are there any things that in your experience of having developed, even for you, Goober, you've developed quite a bit for 5th edition. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to be mindful of avoiding when developing Everyday Heroes?
You know what? I can't say that there were specific things we were looking to avoid. I mean, the main thing is to, I think it was to keep the idea that this is kind of falling back on what I said earlier. This is neither an adaptation of D20 Modern nor an adaptation of 5e. It's a modern game, and that we want to use the best. We want to make it approachable as a modern game. Now, we just looking at it. 5e is the base for where the rules are developing out of, for the reasons we talked about earlier. But to keep the eye on the fact that this game is its own game, and just because something was done that way, either in D20 Modern or in 5e, is not a good enough reason for it to work that way in this game. Right? The question is always, what's working best for our game? And Sig and Goober very much have kept their eyes on that. Well, that question comes up, and that statement comes up a lot in design discussions.
Yeah, a lot of the time we would have a situation where we've by default we're kind of using the 5e system reference document, but for each of like the rules in there, it's we look at it and is this how we want to do it?
Starting point maybe how does it happen in 5e, right? But that's not even it's a starting point for the discussion, not the starting point for this is the rule.
Yeah, and so like if there isn't a good reason to change it, we kept it the 5th edition way, because that way it's familiar, it's easy to learn for lots of people. But we weren't married to that. There's a lot of things like the way we did armor, the way vehicles work. There's a lot of little things that were changed to make it work better for a modern world.
I really love the idea that just because this is how it was done before, or this is how it's being done now, that's not enough to make it what we chose to stick with Everyday Heroes. That's really comforting to hear. When developing this, did you kind of look back at any of the any feedback from the original D20 and know that this was a point of contention back in the day and work towards avoiding it?
I did a lot of third-party development for D20 Modern. I mean, I was one of the secondary designers on the core game, and I was one of the main designers on the supplemental material. But I also did a lot of third-party stuff, so we heard a lot of feedback. So yeah, I mean, I can't think of specific instances, but there are a lot of the points, and Sig and Goober wouldn't know them because I didn't pull it out. But a lot of my questions, a lot of my perspective comes from the questions that were thrown at me when I was doing the Modern Player's Companion or working on things like D20 Future and other things like that. The questions that got asked of those products and the questions we were answering with those products and the replies that the fan base threw at us just kind of informed how I looked going forward at all future products. So I guess the answer is, hey, it's in there. It's like the garlic in your spaghetti sauce. It's in there, but you can't pull out a little piece of it.
Yeah, the other thing I can think of is like the wealth system. Mm-hmm. I know there's been a lot of discussion about that. I think a lot of people didn't like it. Some people liked it a lot. So like that was something that we definitely kind of talked a lot about and wanted to make sure we got really right this time around.
I mean, and this wealth system is a great example. Whatever it is in our book, regardless, I'm not saying what we have is the best, though I think it's pretty awesome. But the wealth system is an example of one of those things that you were going to have people who want to play this game who have diametrically opposed things they want out of that, and you cannot serve them both. So your best bet is to kind of talk it through. It's a long discussion, and you talk it through, and you try this, and you look at that, and you find out what the best thing for our game is, and you're prepared to have conversations with people who say, I want a dollar for dollar thing, and someone who says, I want a completely abstract thing because I don't want to track dollars and cents. And like, okay, well, here's what we got. Here's how it floats in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanna track dollars and cents, like you can just do that. Like it works like the real world. You already know how that works.
No one is happy with that answer, though, right? I mean, for 20 years, that was an answer we were given back when the first one launched. You can do that. Like, no, I want to force everyone to do that. I want that to be the rule. Like,
yeah.
No, that brings up a very good point that I kind of wanted to touch on. I just didn't know how to attack it, which is part of game design is, like you mentioned, Stan, like there are going to be some instances where some people are just not going to be happy with some of the choices just because they're so, diametrically opposed. If you go one way, then you can't go the other. So how, once you hit that point, how do you usually deal with it, and how has the feedback changed from when you were working with those third-party companies to like right now?
Well, how it's changed, first of all, is that social media has exploded. People had to work a lot harder to tell me what they thought 20 years ago.
That was nice.
In the end, what you wind up doing is very much what I described before. You kind of look at all the options, and then the key point is to stop, put it all down, and kind of not look at those answers and look at your game and say, okay, what's important for our game? All right, now look at these things again, and what answers those questions back.
Yeah, you can't make a game that is for literally everybody. It just that is not a thing that's even physically possible. So the best things to do are either make a very, very specific system, and those are great for your tiny systems, something like Powered by the Apocalypse games. I think are really good for, I want to do this one specific kind of game. And if that's the kind of game you want, then here it is. And if not, then you can leave it. For a bigger thing, something like this, based on the 5th edition principles, it's more about kind of a broad approach. We want something that's kind of middle ground of a lot of things. But we still can't please everyone. It's not going to be an extreme in any given direction. It's just sort of the broadest sort of middle ground, I think, of appeal.
Yeah, a lot of those edge of the spectrum games that Goober's talking about, their game design is based on creating a very specific kind of event at the table, right? That's what they want to create, a style of play. And one of the things that D&D in the modern era, there was a point when that was true for D&D, because no one knew any better, right? The D&D being the game that brought it up started with but grew out of wargaming, and it has realized its potential as it's broadened. Yeah. But in D&D is a toy box kind of game, is a toolbox kind of game. And so you can have people who play the game, the same set of rules, and they enable people to play the game they want over a very broad spectrum. They're out at the edges, it breaks down, which is why you get people who yell about how bad D&D is because it doesn't let them play the way they want, and they create these games which are specifically aimed to make that kind of to provide that kind of gameplay.
Yeah.
So I think that when we looked at what we were doing with Everyday Heroes, we wanted something like I was just describing. We want a game that a lot of different people can tweak a bit to play the way they want, and it'll break down at the edges. There's no denying that's going to happen. As Goober said, it's not for everyone, but it covers a big swath of people. The same set of rules as they are, either work out of the box or with a little tweaking come into focus for a very wide array of game styles and game players.
Yeah, and I've run a lot of 5th edition games of like very different styles. Like I did a Curse of Strahd game where it was very psychological. It was very sort of like deep into the characters. It was horror. It didn't feel like just here's a dungeon that we're gonna do, and it worked like amazingly. And I've also done much more traditional adventure kind of games with it, and it worked great for that. So I feel very, very confident about sort of the basis of the system working for like a broad stroke of like genres in addition to just like sort of player styles. I think it, the very fringes of people who want, maximum crunch or, a very specific storytelling style or whatever, maybe it can't do that, but it goes further than maybe it looks like on the tin.
Yeah, I can say just from the actual plays that we have going of Everyday Heroes and some of the play tests that I've done, I mean, the identity that I would give this system is one that is remarkably flexible. I've seen games that are like hardcore, The Wire type deals with like undercover cops and kind of stuff. And then I've seen like really joking ones. One of the actual plays that we're setting up, we recorded our first two episodes, and it's basically breaking into Kickstarter to like steal a Kickstarter. So it's like you can have like your comical type stories or your hard and gritty type story. So I think that reflects exactly what you're alluding to, Goober. It's just that this system can stretch itself. But that's just my take on it. Like, I mean, if you had to, I mean, our Kickstarter is going to be going live on the 17th. If you had to, pitch it, really quickly to somebody here, how are you pitch? What's your elevator pitch for Everyday Heroes?
It's awesome. Buy
it. That's a good
one. Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on how much people know about RPGs and if they've heard about this thing or whatever. But I assume people know what D&D is. So so I think I would pitch it as hey, you know D&D. You know how it's fantasy. This one is for the modern world. And there was this game before called D20 Modern that had kind of that same idea, but it was based on an older D&D. And so now we've got this one based on the newer D&D, which is awesome. D&D, the newer D&D even has been around for a while. So, there's been a lot to kind of learn about that. And so, it's even better than 5th edition D&D because of that. That's my pitch.
I dig it.
I would focus on the D&D, those kind of games, right? That's fantasy. That's like Lord of the Rings. It's like Game of Thrones, right? This is that kind of game, very similar to that kind of game, but it's for like action movies. It's like for modern stuff. And I started to throw a couple of modern action titles. You want to play this and you want to play that. That's this game.
Insert action movie here.
Right.
I feel like The Expendables is just an Everyday Heroes campaign with nothing but brutes. Sorry. Stray thought. Are there any particular features or any particular aspects of the game that you're drawn to more than any other?
So this is going to be true about both this game and D20 Modern. Mm-hmm. So the thing about D&D is because of the way it's built, everything focuses around how it applies to combat. And the challenges with D20 Modern and the challenge with one of the challenges with Everyday Heroes is to make that half the story. That the things that you can do, that each each class is built to do. They've got things they can do in combat and things they can do out of combat, and it just creates characters that out of the gate are a little more well-rounded.
Yeah, we have more like skill proficiencies characters generally end up with, which I think is really nice for characters that would normally just be punch stuff. You get a couple more that you can put into your investigation, persuasion, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that the thing that draws me to it is the fact that the game is. I mean, when you play D&D, a lot of your time is doing things like interacting with the people in the town and blah blah blah. But almost all of those are times where you're taking the rules and you're putting them aside so you can play this part of the game. With Everyday Heroes, the rules don't have to get put aside; they're still part of what's going on. It's part of the game, the mechanically.
Yeah, a lot of like the rules, a lot of the sort of bulky long sections of rules is combat. A lot of your special abilities and stuff is like how do you approach a fight, because it sucks to be the character who can't fight and be put into combat. So it's very important that everyone have something. But there's definitely characters who are much more like social or investigation focused. I think in D&D, it's hard to build a character that is focused on non-combat. You can certainly do it. Like there's a few ways, but generally speaking, you're going to be primarily about fighting.
If you do that in D&D,
yeah.
You are giving up your ability to be an interesting character in this big part of the game. And that's not the case here, right?
Yeah, so here you can build a very fighty character, but you're still going to have some skill options that you can do. You're still going to have some you're still part of the modern world. You still have a profession. You're still more than just you fight. And then the characters that are heavily focused on stuff that is non-combat, they have something to do in a fight, because it would be kind of boring for them otherwise. But you can definitely be much more specialized towards that.
Yeah, you build a cerebral character, but when it comes fight time, they don't have to hide behind the desk. They've got something to do, which is suited to their character.
Yeah, or they hide behind a desk and yell at their friends to do better.
Right.
Which is a thing the mastermind does.
Yeah, you totally can make that character, but it's a choice.
Mm-hmm. I love that, because there have been a lot of times where outside of combat, you can feel useless if you've put all your feats and all of your gold into just being a walking killing machine. There's not a lot of nuance to the, I almost called it diplomacy skill. My 3.5 is showing, but there's not a lot of room for diplomacy out or inside of combat. So I love that outside of combat and inside of combat are basically equal in the system from the sounds of it. Can we get a few examples of how that is? How if I make a character that is designed to be, the talker, how am I still useful in combat? And if I make a character that is just I'm a muscle wizard, how am I useful outside of combat?
Yeah, so one of the classes for the charming hero is manipulator, and basically all of their stuff is based on social things. They have abilities to. They have a trick where they can avoid blame, the authorities will let them off with a warning. They have one called Trust Me, where they can get someone to confide in them. At higher level, they can straight up just hypnotize somebody and make them do something. So and in addition to they're good at social skills. So, if you're just rolling deception, they're good at that. But in combat, they don't have any weapon proficiencies by default, but their main move is to demoralize people. So they just can, as an action, basically debuff an enemy and give them penalties to attack and defense. And so, you're not rolling attacks, you're not doing damage, but you're definitely participating. And if you want to, you can make up whatever insults you're hurling at the enemy. And if you're playing a manipulator, probably that's the kind of thing you like doing.
Yeah.
And like I said, with the hiding behind the desk yelling at people, the mastermind of smart heroes is one that is much more out of combat focused, less social focused, more kind of problem solving. But they have this ability where they can let an ally re-roll an attack because they tell them how they're doing it wrong. So on their turn, they might make an attack roll. They're not super good at it, but they can shoot a gun or something if they want to. But then also when their allies are doing stuff, they can help out in a way that is flavorful and fun. So they still get to participate, even though they're not the one doing huge tons of dice of damage or whatever. When the fightier character gets re-rolls their miss and gets a critical hit and does 70 damage, so much, they get to sit there and be like, I did that.
I love it. There's something that this system does that we've pulled from the original that I think is absolutely brilliant, which is that each attribute has a class, which it seems so simple, but it's brilliant. We've got strength-based classes, constitution-based classes. Every attribute has a class based on it, which would seem like common sense, but it's so beautiful in the sense that it makes every part of the character sheet matter. I guess my question is, when you decided to bring that aspect back, were there any specific challenges? I mean, in modern 5th edition, con and intelligence are kind of ignored. You get your hit points, you get your spell increase, but other than that, they're kind of like abandoned stats these days. So, bringing prominence back to those stats, how did that process go?
Well, so the basic of it, where just there is a class for each thing, definitely helps. In D&D, intelligence has wizard and now artificer and stuff. So there's characters that want it in both systems, but one of the big things I think is that intelligence is very important in the modern world. So there's more skills that are based on it. So our medicine skill is based on intelligence, because it's much more modern medicine that you have to study rather than you're a woodsman who can do first aid. So I think intelligence is a little bit better for even characters that aren't the smart hero. And constitution is always good for everybody. Being tougher in general is good. But I do also really like that we have characters that are specifically constitution based, which D&D doesn't really have. There's characters that are tougher and meant to be more tanky, and you probably want constitution. But having that being kind of front and center is really cool.
How about you, Stay? You got any thoughts?
Oh, I got a lot of thoughts. So D20 Modern was built out of a mini game that Bill Slavicek did for Polyhedron magazine. I think it was the first of the mini games that they published. And there was no tough hero in that. And in the original design, as it was brought over, there was no tough hero. They had something for all of the other abilities, but not tough. And the reason was they sat down as a group, the group that you've been doing a lot of talking with, most of them, Jeff and Charles and Rich and Bill. And they started coming up with characters from lore and movies and who that fit into different characters. And they couldn't find anyone to put in the tough slot. And they said, there's just no such thing as a tough hero. I would say this is my biggest contribution to D20 Modern and everything going forward was I walked in and I said, you guys are insane. You absolutely have to have a tough hero. And they said, well, tell us why. And my first pitch was based on, look, you can't have every stat except tough. And they're like, okay, well, who's a tough hero? And I looked up at who they had and I said, well, you've got Rocky Balboa in a strong hero. They said, yeah, he's a boxer. He knocks people out. He's a strong hero. I said, no. What's cool about Rocky isn't that he hits people, is that he can take a punch. You hit him 8,000 times and he always gets up and he comes back. Rocky is a tough hero. And I don't remember the other examples, but I went through their list of strong heroes and at least half of them were tough heroes. Right? Heroes with high strength. Like they did fighty things, but what made them special was they could take a licking. And so,
like John McClane, I think, Die Hard, like that. I think that's a tough hero.
Yeah. So my biggest claim to fame is the fact that a tough hero exists.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's really true.
The second thing is, I think weirdly in D&D for a long time, intelligence has been the mental stat that's been the toughest to figure out what to do with. When you get to Modern, it seems to me that wisdom becomes a tough one to deal with, because in D&D, wisdom is absolutely tied into cleric and divine stuff.
Yeah.
You get in the Modern world, and there is less obvious things to do with wisdom. I think it's there, and clearly, I mean, the stuff that was done in the past and that Sig and Goober have done this time shows that it's all there, but it is the stat that's hardest skill-wise and conceptually to build on in a modern setting. Intelligence, as Goober just said, the modern world is built on smartness, right? It becomes a snap to find. In fact, you maybe have a problem that you want to do too many things with intelligence, but wisdom becomes the one that is the bigger challenge to me.
Yeah, which is interesting because in our initial designs, in kind of coming up with what each of these classes was going to do, the smart hero was kind of one of the hardest ones to pin down, which is why we came up with this system of plans. Because I really wanted them to be.
Do I love the plans?
I really wanted the smart heroes to be doing like big stuff with their intelligence, not just being like good at some intelligence skills. But like as we've been refining and nailing things down, the wise heroes have actually gone through the most change. Like they've been the most sort of like tweaked and kind of figuring out exactly what their identity is and how their mechanics should work and everything. And we've gotten it to a place that I'm very happy with. But wisdom is always weird in D&D because it's a few different things. It's obviously in D&D it's like your faith religion kind of stuff. It's for clerics, it's for druids. But it's also common sense, it's willpower, it's perception. So when coming up with the classes for Wise Hero, it's each one is kind of focusing a little bit on like a different aspect of wisdom, which I think is cool.
Yeah, wisdom. So I think wisdom and toughness they pair off in a lot of different ways, but they're one's physical and one's mental, but they're the reactive ones, right? Toughness is how can you take a punch, and wisdom is a lot about reacting to either sifting through what's before you or resisting, it's a lot less obvious in the modern world to find ways to find a character where that's their defining
example for people who don't know. The wise heroes for everyday heroes are we've got the master, which is very monk-like. They're very like Zen. That's very focused on like the willpower, balance of self, self-control, that kind of thing. And we've got the sleuth, which is very much perception based. They're all about like noticing details, and they can find like weak points in enemies and things like that. And then the hunter, which is they get an animal friend, and they're kind of more both kind of having that like in tune with nature kind of idea, but they can also just be like a bounty hunter that doesn't go to the woods at all. So they also have a bit of that like tracking and perception kind of a feel to them.
Yeah, nature writ large is in tune with their surroundings.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about the sleuth in particular. On the Gen Con Everyday Hero actual play, we have Peter Atkinson playing the sleuth, and he's kind of playing it like very Sherlock-y almost. And I think Sherlock, I think intelligence because it's tied to the investigation skill, but in our system that's not the case. And I was wondering, how did we come to that decision? How do we make that move?
Yeah, well, so the sleuth specifically is meant to be kind of very much the wisdom side of that. Like in the game I'm running right now, which I'm doing the session 2 of tonight. I've got a player who is a noir detective as a sleuth, and you can play it kind of a lot of different ways, but the sleuth is very much about that like kind of reactive and like noticing things, and like they can't be surprised because they're so like aware of their surroundings. They're very good at perception and insight, and they also can be extremely good at investigation. Like they do get some stuff that extends the ability of wise heroes to re-roll a wisdom check. They can extend that to intelligence checks. So they lean intelligence a little bit. It makes a lot of sense to have intelligence as kind of your secondary thing. But they're not necessarily Sherlock Holmes. They're much more like a police detective, a private eye.
Sherlock Holmes, first of all, is a very high level character.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He does a lot of things. But like I would probably, if I wanted to make Sherlock Holmes, I would probably make him a mastermind who has multi-classed into sleuth, because a lot of what he does is very much on the intelligence side of things. But what's cool about it is you can build it how you want. You can build a Sherlock-like character as a sleuth with high intelligence. You can build it as a smart hero with high wisdom. There's a lot of kind of crossover potential. It just depends on how you want to do it and what exact abilities you want.
Interestingly, I'm also playing a sleuth. Stig is running a game for us on Saturday nights, and that's
the sleuth is popular. Everybody
it's a good archetype.
And also, just really quickly backtracking towards the Constitution. Thank you for, like he said, that's your claim to fame. Thank you, because I love tough heroes more than anything. Marv from Sin City is my favorite, and that is a dude that can take a punch. So, like, just being able to have a character based on that is
Yeah, I just in terms of the tough hero, like the biggest challenge of that is being indestructible on its own is not a good ability. Like, because what else is indestructible is just not another party member. Like, just being able to not die isn't enough. So it's always an interesting challenge to kind of build characters like that, where how do you apply being tough? And my answer to that is a tough hero by default is a tank, which means they're taking hits for their friends. They have ways to either force enemies to attack them or punish enemies for attacking somebody else. Or they're kind of more fightery. They get a lot of offense in addition to being really tough. So like that was kind of a cool challenge to put together. Like how does a tough hero actually like play? Rather than just like what's their theme. And I think
balancing
we've done
that
very
against
good
the
things.
strength heroes, yeah, that's a juggling act for sure.
I'd say,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that I've not had my hands deep in what's going on. I've been more of a consulting force here in this particular design. But my thought on it when I bring it to it is like goes back to again what I was just saying a little earlier. The tough hero is a reactive, but depends on how you wanted your character to see the world, right? Are you trying to stand in the road and say, what I don't want to happen will not happen? Or do you want to be the person who goes and says, what I want to happen is gonna happen, right? The strength characters are about enforcing taking what they want and making it happen. And tough characters are about preventing the thing that you don't want to happen from happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my take on it. That's a Stan personal take.
That's a good take. That's a good
absolutely.
So I think we're gonna wrap with this one last question, which is multi-classing has changed significantly from how it's done in base 5th edition to how we do it, and it's changed even more from like your 3.5 4th edition to now. So I just what were the thought processes around how we were going to tackle multi-classing? And what I can tell you what I like about it, but I'm kind of curious as to personally, what do you like about how we handled multi-classing?
All right, before we talk about, let me start because Goober has the most to say about it, a lot more than I do. The problem with multi-classing, I'm going to go from the historical perspective. And the problem is you always want to do two things at once and trying to mix them, creating the formula for how you mix them is like it is like looking for transmuting lead into gold. Right? Everyone thinks they have it, and it works a little, and then it doesn't work here, and then it doesn't work at all.
Right.
And D20 Modern, 3rd edition D20 Modern, were early in that D20, the D20 system writ large era, and we were trying a new thing, and it worked, but it broke down at a certain point. And D20 Modern, we had advanced classes. I can't remember what the name for the beyond advanced classes. There's a second level. You could get advanced classes, and then it's the old brain. It doesn't work the way it used to. But that's the way we solved a lot of those problems. Was it was even tiered beyond multi-classing, beyond tough. Your generic got more specific and got more specific. Or in D&D, you could pull things together and multi-class at it. But it was always let's say it's always been a moving target, and every generation has had a version of it that has, and every version of it has eventually been found to have cracks so large that it undid it. It looked like it worked, and then because of the cracks, once you saw the cracks, people said, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
So even in 5th edition, we got to this point where they're doing what they're doing, and we came to it and looked at it and said, yeah, it's not really working, particularly for Modern. We wanted to do something better. And then...
So Yeah, so one thing that fifth edition had already kind of solved with the advanced classes is turning all that stuff into subclasses, so that you don't have to be, a rogue that then becomes a duelist that then takes a level in dervish, or like it's you get to still be your base class, and also you get to specialize some. And my initial inclination was to kind of keep things modular, like D&D, and kind of have things be kind of that standard, like you take levels and different stuff. But what we ended up with was kind of even more of the problem you see in fifth edition, which is taking a few levels in a bunch of stuff is extremely strong until it's not. And so you end up with characters who at second level are unbelievably powerful, and then at fifth level they're bad. Because everybody else is getting their upgraded stuff, and it ends up just sort of being weird and not working quite right. And we wanted to have characters be able to at first level get enough cool stuff to feel like they're that class. So it was even more, if you take one level and a bunch of stuff, it's not gonna work out so well. So basically, we just took that idea of the subclass, or rather, I will say Sig took that. I was actually kind of hesitant at first, but then he put it together and was like, "Here's how it's going to work." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I'm on board now." And the idea where you can still be your main class without just like now I'm multi-classing into this, so I don't get anything from my original class anymore. And so now multi-classing is done with feats. You can just take multi-classing instead of, say, a bonus to an ability score, instead of another kind of separate customized ability, but you still are always getting your core classes abilities. Once you get to the top level, you're not missing out on the cool thing that everybody else is getting. It's just, if you're multi-classing and another character isn't, they're just getting different extra stuff than you are. And I think that just works out really well, kind of in accordance with the way that we're doing the subclasses, which we're calling just the classes, because those are sort of the focus, where your broad archetype is your strong, tough, but you get to be a tough hero who is also a bodyguard, and you get to be that all the way through your development. But also you can multi-class into smart hero, you can multi-class into charming hero, and you're not losing out on being a cool tough hero.
I dig it. Again, it kind of goes back to our Sherlock build, which is your mastermind with a touch, just a scooch of Sleuth in there. I like it.
Yeah, and you can sort of go as deep as you want. There's sort of three different feats. You start with multi-classing into one of the archetypes, one of the big classes, and then you can sort of focus in on one of the classes. And actually, one other really cool thing that this allows is you can actually multi-class within your own archetype. So, like, if you're a strong hero and a brute, you can multi-class into the strong hero heavy. So you just skip right over the strong hero feat, and you can just start taking the multi-class feats for the other kinds of strong hero.
Oh, that's cool.
Which, in D&D, like, you can't multi-class cleric with cleric, because that just gets weird and complicated and doesn't really work at all. Whereas here, you get to just, you're already a strong hero. the heavy abilities already work with your base class stuff. So you just take those feats, and now you're that too.
Well, thank you for rubbing it in that I'll never be a double cleric.
Then someone needs to write that up now. I'm a double cleric.
I'm a double cleric, so when I don't heal you, I mean it twice. Well, I think that's been a lot of insight into the system. I know I, for one, am awfully excited to have this come out and see everybody's reaction to it. I guess I'm just going to leave us with this. If there's one thing that you could add to Everyday Heroes, or what are you excited to see brought to Everyday Heroes, what would it be? I worded that terribly.
We're in the middle of building it. I mean, right now, if I had an answer to that, I'd be pushing to get it put in. Right? This should have everything we want in it. Right? Can it be expanded out? Right? Every game is going to have a scope that it covers, and there will be things that you want that are outside that scope, but they don't belong in there. Like, they belong out there. I think that this game has everything that belongs under its dome.
Yeah,
absolutely.
There's nothing I want to bring in, but I can't wait to see some of those things we're going to build outside that dome too.
Yeah, I mainly say that to appease the hundreds of people on the socials that keep going, Anarthakana?
Yeah, that's basically the thing that I'm excited to do after this, because that's fully outside of the scope of the basic system. We've got some monsters and things in there that are like supernatural if you want to use them. But characters don't get to have magic powers. They don't get to have superpowers. They don't get to pilot giant robots. They're just normal people, quote unquote. They're action movie heroes.
Dare I say they're everyday heroes?
Yes.
Hey, I'm not proud of myself. I'm not proud of myself for that.
But yeah, so I'm really interested in getting to delve into like magical characters, and how do we have characters be elves and fairies, and all the cool stuff you can do with that, like sort of urban magic setting. But it's definitely not a core thing. Like that would be very, very much a lot to put into the core book. But I think it's probably one of the first things I'm at least interested in doing once the core is out there.
Yeah.
I mean, even in D21, right? You say it, Urban Arcana was a separate product.
That's true.
Yeah, and same thing with, like, there were some monsters and stuff in there, but there wasn't like magic to begin with.
Yeah, you see, Minions, I tried. You keep asking about it. I asked them.
Right? Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. We want that, but it just doesn't belong in this package.
Yeah, and like trust me, I'm as excited to do it as everybody is to play it.
I mean,
I really love that setting.
One of my current projects is based off something that started when I was working on Urban Arcana, so I still love it.
I love everything about the concept of it. I want to play it real bad, but we've got work to do on the core book, and that's where you all come in. Please back our Kickstarter so we have all the reason in the world to bring that back, because we want to do it. We want to play it just as bad as y'all want to see it. So I think that's the perfect place for us to wrap. Thank you both for joining me today. I hope everybody got some good insight into the system. I can't wait to have both of you and Sig, because that's what I'm going to start hounding you about, the monsters that we can expect to be facing off of the system. But until then, that's us. You guys want to sign off?
I guess. Bye. good chat. I'm excited to get this Kickstarter going and get people playing this game.
Yeah, no, thanks for doing this, Noir. I love the conversation, and everyone out there, please check out the Kickstarter. This is going to be an awesome game. We want you to be a part of it.
Hey, can't sign off any better than that.
That was
Bye,
very
everybody.